It's a great pleasure to introduce the next conversation between artists Anne Imhof and Carolyn Christov-Bakargiev. Anne Imhof, through her sculptures, paintings, drawings, and quote-unquote durational performances, offers an unprecedented expression of the experience of the contemporary world in which physicality is increasingly mediated by digital communication. The new forms of alienation and detachment dictated by the massive spread of social media and its new related gestures can be considered an essential component in the artist's work. Imhof was awarded the Golden Lion at the Venice Biennale in 2017. It's my pleasure to give the floor to Anne and Carolyn now. Thank you.
Hello, Caroline.
Hello, Anne.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
So, first of all, thank you for being here, there, wherever we are.
Yeah,
and
very much. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this.
Now, the oddity here is that you are in Berlin, I think,
Yes.
or at least not in Torino. And I am in Castello di Rivoli with your exhibition closed because we opened the exhibition on November 4th and closed on November 5th. And so, and it is, I believe, the first exhibition that you open, a solo show in a museum. I may be mistaken, but please correct me if I am, without a performative element at the beginning, right at the opening. So first, what does this mean? And it is happening in the same year as a very, very difficult, traumatic pandemic all over the world, which rightfully has closed spaces of aggregation and social aggregation. And your work, one of the main materials of your work, one of your investigations, was how people aggregate and disaggregate and connect, and according to a score within a certain place, with a kind of fluidity between visitor and performer, also a lack of clarity on that boundary. So this material, which in the moment now is not possible to use, allowed you, I think, to imagine an exhibition without the performance, which you created. And at the same time, you didn't expect that it would also be an exhibition without visitors. So suddenly it has somehow all been evacuated in terms of the live embodied part. And there are objects, paintings, sculptures, drawings, a sound. It almost reminds me of a strange, an anticipation of a digital world where there is nobody really necessary anymore. I mean, the artificial intelligence predicts for non-humans who react as computers, and it almost is a kind of a sci-fi dream of a dystopic future without the alliance, the multi-species alliance of plants, insect, trees, humans, and the vibrant matter of the world. But anyway, that's what I say at 7:35 GMT plus 1 time.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. And like, it's true, we opened a show and it closed on on the evening of the preview, so to say. And I was actually quite excited to open the show like this. In a way, it gave like a lot of room to the works of mine, paintings and objects, without the life part of the work, that a lot of time lets these like objects and paintings and also in this case there was like a larger body of drawings, lets it go a little bit into a background, become a background. In a way, I like when that happens as much as I don't like when it happens. And in a way, you started now with, I think, the most serious question that I would have anticipated at the end of our conversation, which is basically what is like a painting, or what is an object, what is art, even if it has its room where it is where it's hung or where it is placed, without the one who is looking at it. So I think that brings not only like the life part of my work in a situation like where it is like important to think about what is the body if it's in a space, and what does it evoke. It's also like kind of, is there like what is an art piece without the one who's looking at it?
I think I'm here. Do you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
So well, I'll go to another last question, I guess, which could be the last question, which is, in the images that circulate when you do performances in the spaces, you didn't plan it, but the images circulated constantly through Instagram, so they had a big reverberation in terms of the digital world of the social media, which caused then all of the lines outside of the pavilion, for example, in Venice, to get in, and then even more multiplication of these images in the social media. You were happy about doing the exhibition without the performance. We couldn't do the performance at the beginning. So it became an exhibition that you were able to care for from the perspective of the layout and installation of the works that were physical objects. For example, a long glass spine, let's say, of the 140-meter long Manica Lunga, it was split in two by these objects, about 30 or 35, large architectural shaped objects that were frames, basically self-standing frames that contained glass, and that were designed when we conceived the exhibition, which was a collaboration with Tate and Art Institute of Chicago from the beginning, as somehow connected with the Manica Lunga, the same way the piers were also conceived somehow thinking maybe about Chicago piers. So there was a memory of a space that was anticipated in the other venues. And then when you installed it here, without preparing for a performance at the same time, you were very happy that you could spend a lot of time on the physical installation of the physical objects, which became striking here in ways that you were not able to achieve, you thought. I mean, maybe others don't think, but you thought in London. And it was also because you were not distracted by the work that then would be on immediately, which is the performance, which has to do with the performativity also of the being vehicled through the social media immediately. And what you achieved was making a long barrier, so a long row of windows that vertiginously repeated the one at the end throughout the space, dividing it into two very narrow corridors that would suggest the social separations, like when they put cement barriers, or things to organize and control crowds. But instead, as you walked through the space, you would, it's interesting how occasionally the ghosts come up, the drawings, which is interesting, because also the exhibition where you first showed publicly in a museum drawings, which somehow were working like ghosts of these characters in a way. But to go back to what you did in the division of the Manica Lunga, is that it was porous because each window frame was separate from the other, even though they were attached, but the bases were wide enough so that people could walk back and forth from one side to another, somehow abolishing the control, the invisible control that often gives us an illusion of freedom on the internet, this extreme self of the selfie generation, this extreme self of the I like or I don't like, this extreme self of the constructed avatar of a Facebook account. It canceled that extreme self of the internet, and it created a space for enacting of an actual traversing of this barrier, right, left, also because you want to cross to see the painting hanging on the wall on the other side. So it was a constant exercise in phenomenological body movement in a space, like almost a kind of a yoga exercise, which was more extreme than I have ever seen in an exhibition, as if it was positioning the limitations and breaking the limitations constantly, over and over and over and over and over, 30 times on the way down the Manica Lunga. But the tragic element, and I think there is a tragic element, is that we thought there would be this time space to then, not one day, but it lasted one day, you know, like a flower. Mm-hmm. And now we're back online and creating for the Instagram account very artificial posts. What do you think about all this?
That were like a lot of thoughts running through my head while you talked, because of course it's, for me, opening this exhibition Castello di Rivoli was like one of many different forms the works can be in and can take, and it gave some it was the third iteration of sex, so it was a body of work that I feel that I completed with a show at the Castello di Rivoli, and also it was an exhibition still becoming, or it feels still that there's something open, because we scheduled the performance now and the opening of the exhibition to March. For me, I think the experience working on this show without the performative part was simply to have in the installation process more time to focus on the installation, like on the works themselves. Like in the way I work, I often try to keep things open. So I think the live part is also like a way to have that possibility. We can speak later about this, like the main character of the work, of the live work, I think being a thing still in the making or becoming. So the making of the work and the presentation of the work fall almost like into one, which interests me immensely. But then there's the other part of the work that is not collaborative process, and that is quite autonomous. And in this window that opened up for me, there was like calmness inside to install it in the way we installed it now. And the glass spine that you talked about, I had the feeling that it is a sculpture that has like different faces, right? In the Tate Modern in London, it was like a wall yet with holes in it, in the glasses, but it was yet like a wall out of panels that were like describing the curve of the room in Tate Modern, and then placing it the Manica Lunga, and like even if I thought towards the future while making it and knew how I wanted to put it in the Manica Lunga as this like as dissecting basically this long space, it was interesting to me in the end working with it, because in the space is longer than you think. It is like higher than you think, and in a way I like the idea of also interrupting the parading that this space like suggests. And yeah, in a way for me it was like a really good experience to have that, to see this work like shape-shifting and falling into place. I think like the idea of like imagining the future, or the aspect of of an imagination as one of the major
Cambiare il disegno, Stefan.
of one of the major aspects of the work and the work sex. I think it's like in this space and in the show in the Manica Lunga, it's like manifested through these two high beds that basically are the space for dreaming, or so to say, for like being in imagination. So those were also like for me a very integral part of it, and how the drawings like interacted with that.
You've been speaking very technically, let's say, as an artist about the artwork. The artwork also resonates with the world in different ways. One way is you are one of the artists who's been looked at as amongst the most innovative in terms of innovation in performance, for example. But you chose to do drawings that appear in terms of the medium rather old-fashioned, a pencil and a piece of paper, drawing. This seems almost to contrast with what we see on the internet. There's very little on the internet like this. So what does this kind of expressionistic, sometimes Michelangelo-esque, sometimes Giacometti drawings, not at all egoncile, which one would expect in relation to your work, but not. What does that mean? And in the exhibition, what we haven't said is that you also welcomed and asked for a very important painting to be borrowed. You welcomed a major Artemisia Gentileschi painting from the late 1500s, which is Samsone e Dalila, or Giuditta e Oloferne.
Samson
and Dalila by Artemisia Gentileschi, which is a painting where you see a woman in alliance with interclass alliance with another woman, and a woman maybe in aristocratic dress handing over to a woman maybe in servant clothes the hair of a man that she's just snipped the hair off with the scissors. And no one in our Italian history of art had used this way of painting a scissor, you know, which was not a sword or a shield, that painting. And then just to tell the two, I mean, because there were more than two, there were 7 historical works, but one of the main historical works that was very important at the beginning of your work, also for Faust in Venice, because of the glass floor, was the Narcissus of Caravaggio, which you persuaded me to borrow from Palazzo Barberini in Rome. So you know, aside from this difference that we just stated, in the middle of the most acceleration of digitalization during this year, 2020, or last year, 2020, if people watch this in a month, in the moment of the most online time, in the most, let's say, dominant mythology of progress and high tech, and the digital will help us with tracing and avoiding contagion through tracing apps, which of course didn't work at all because they were based on Bluetooth technology. Nobody wants to turn the Bluetooth on in the street for obvious reasons. So in this moment of a lot of hype around how the technology was going to help us to heal, and in reality we are using masks and distancing, which is exactly what was used in all the pandemics of history, probably since the ancient peoples of all over the world, Asia, Africa, Latin America, all over. In this moment, you perform this strange act of making these drawings during lockdown, instead of spending all your day writing stuff to people, and bringing in a Caravaggio painting and an Artemisia Gentileschi painting, a Giacometti painting and a De Chirico painting. So actually Italian art, not Western Eurocentric canon, that's not the point, but actually Italian art from Italian collections, because we couldn't ship anyway from international. So, this, I would like to ask you about this strange shift in the work that hopefully after March someone will see. But the other is, when I saw the drawings, it occurred to me that they seemed to be almost representations of the performers, as if they were the ghosts inhabiting the space of the Manica Lunga, of the performers of former things. And those performers, can we change? Those performers they look like, through these drawings, they appear almost as if it's an imaginary anticipation of a dystopic future again. Of people that are looking for electricity to charge their phones, but they're almost anorexic figures huddled together with a hand. And there's one of them where there's a hand that holds, like a holding hand. The touching is very important, but they're almost like bare life, the representation of bare life somehow. Do you have any thoughts on this? Or you don't have to, we can just look at the drawings.
I think so. There were a lot of things in it. I think the drawings, especially, and so I start there. Like working on the drawings in this time was feeling quite like autonomous. There was like something that I could do that is part of my practice, or that was like, let's say when I look at what I did all the time being an artist is drawing, or like I like putting like composing in this way, and I think the drawings in those that are in the Manikalunga, they for sure show situations and compositions that that I anticipate or that interest me. I wouldn't say, maybe they are related to images that are shown in my life work as well, but I also think there's like an element inside that that is a little bit of like in what you said, that it's a bit of a misunderstanding. I don't think there's like so much fragility in it. I think that the bodies, like on the one hand, they're not like one so much. They're like some of them are like figured out more than others. Some parts of them are like seem to be like not really functioning, or like the body's like I start somewhere and I like kind of construct my way through it. And so I have the feeling that it is about like it is about like not one body but many, even if there's only like one figure to be seen on the paper. And I feel like in my work in general, there's like there's something inside the life work as well that I would not see as that I would see as like working against that moment of like kind of an image that like shows like anemic like bodies that are not moving much. There's like, on the contrary, like pas de deux of like immense energy, and it's loud, and the people performing it like are like showing that energy and showing their physicality and possibilities. And it also not always looks like very beautiful. There's also something to it that is on the blade of, is like, can I look at this or not? Or so I feel there's like a complexity in that, where I think also that it, even if we are like that I wouldn't like in the same way combine them with, for example, you would say like a universelle Fortschrittsangst, like to taking the digital and saying like it's it's what makes us like apart from each other. It's like what it's like a representation of this very digital era. And I think it's the same, like you say, okay, to long for an Artemisia Gentileschi in the show. It was like partly your suggestions, also to like meld the Espressioni exhibition with the show of my works, which I think I really very much enjoyed. I very much enjoyed seeing the paintings arriving, like seeing also what they what is in them, what interests me now. And of course the Artemisia Gentileschi, there's an alliance amongst women, like over like classes. There's like there's a different kind of violence that it used, but yet is used, and yet it's like the depiction of it. It for me, like to, for example, have those works from like, or have like the Caravaggio painting of Narcissus in the show. Of course, it was also like kind of a nod towards the self-reflection, or what is seen in the self. Is it like fluid? Can it be gone in the next moment, where like his reflection in the water could go away in the very second? It's like a distorted self. But on the other hand, of course, I'm like interested in something that that happens when those paintings are seen with the other works together.
Well, Anne, I think we might see what happens when we listen to a short excerpt of the sound that is in the Manica Lunga now, without visitors.
Well, thank you so much, Anne and Carolyn, for this wonderful conversation, and especially looking at Caravaggios seminal painting Narcissus, which will also be featured in Anne Imhof's exhibition at Castello di Rivoli, which is upcoming. And through this painting, presenting a consideration of the collapse of the image in its own reflection as a representation of the narcissistic times that we live in, punctuated by the constant capturing of selfies on our phones. However, Imhof's reading of narcissism shifts it away from a merely negative connotation, opening up the concept to further levels of self-interpretation. A selfie could be a tool to rediscover ourselves in an unexpected way and understand what role we may play in this accelerated society, if only we were willing to read our image differently. Thank you.